Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 67th level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined for the very first time on the show by the level 99 Yorha agent, Mr. Ngachacha. Ngachacha, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening? Canadian Thanksgiving evening, no less. How are you doing, my friend?
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Ryan, to my fellow Canadians, and thank you for the appropriate title. I was wondering what you would give me, but level 99 Yorha agent is the way to go.
See, I got on like the edge of the diving board as I usually do, and I usually like come up with something on the spot for people, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm supposed to do this, aren't I? I'm supposed to come up with a class for you. But I mean, you know, I couldn't think of anything more fitting considering the fact that, I mean, in NieRAutomata, you don't really play as like a character class or anything like that. You work for Yorha. That's just what you do over there. So that's all
That's what you are.
Exactly. So, of course, as you may have been able to figure out, number one, this show is Neato, apparently according to chat. But number two, you know, this is the RPG Cave where we talk about RPGs all the time. And tonight's topic is going to be NieRAutomata. But before we get into all that, folks, let me tell you about the ways you can help the show out if you feel so inclined to do so. So, number one, if you're watching the live stream right now, over on youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already, and then ding, 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 ring that bell to be notified whenever we go live or whenever we put up new videos like this one, or like the two reviews that I did earlier this week, both for Valkyrie Elysian and Deophode Chronicle, which of course you would expect people who like this program will probably be into as well. So check those out on the channel. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there as well. And don't forget to rate us 5 stars if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that helps the show get discovered. Also, if you want the show a little bit early, or you want some exclusive content like the Yumi Capri podcast, which we're actually recording later this week, you head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. And then, last but not least, if you would like an RPG Cave t-shirt, like the one Ngachacha is wearing right now, or if any of our other Carpool Gaming branded t-shirts, head on over to our merch store, bit.ly/cpgmerch. Well, without all that out of the way, it's time to read from the sacred texts, because it is time to talk about NieR. We finally have an opportunity to talk about this on the show. We talked about it, Matt and I talked about NieR a little bit on last week's show, because we did our favorite PlayStation 4 games of all time episode. But this week, we're going to finally go in depth with the NieR series a little bit. Again, we're going to focus on NieRAutomata, but I'm going to bring up the other games just a little bit, just a teensy bit. We're going to surface tease, though, a little bit. But I know, of course, you know, to bring someone in to talk about NieR, like, there was no better person, I think, really than to bring Ngachacha in to talk about it. He's like, you're definitely like the biggest NieR fan that I know who exists in real life at this point, who is an android, you know, sent from the future that NieR exists in anyways. But yeah, just go to if you go to Ngachacha's Twitter feed, by the way, it's just him just talking about NieR and some other stuff over there. So
You got it. You got it. Honestly, if you guys didn't mention NieRAutomata on the last week's episode, the episode you did with Matt, I might have shed a little tear if you didn't mention it at least once.
Probably. I mean, you'd probably feel however Kevin Ainsworth feels every time I say that Banjo is overrated, because, you know,
you got it.
That's just how it is. But anyways, we're going to dive into this proper. We're going to do some fun facts, because I brought some very loose fun facts tonight to go over. And again, we're going to start with kind of like the NieR series as a whole, because it's got an interesting backstory. So first off, the NieR series was created by Yoko Taro, who has been working at Square for years and years and years, as a spin-off of the Drakengard series, and it takes place about 1,000 years into the future after the first game's 5th ending. Drakengard, for folks that don't know or haven't played it, because there hasn't been a new Drakengard game since the PlayStation 3 era, it's like a fantasy medieval action RPG. Those games are like hit or miss with some people. You either really like them or you don't like them at all. You kind of despise them. Kind of like the first NieR game for some people too, was kind of like that as well. Or just a lot of Yoko Taro stuff. I've always felt, you know, that way, at least a little bit about it. So it's a spin-off of the Drakengard games, but honestly, you know, you don't need to play the Drakengard games to understand what happens here, because they're not really connected other than the fact that they exist like in the same world. Like NieR takes place in like the post-apocalyptic like world of the Drakengard games. So if that makes any sense. But they then after like with the original game, there were two versions of the original game released: NieR Replicant, which features a younger protagonist, and then NieR Gestalt with an older protagonist. But we only got Gestalt here in North America on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And we actually have a question about that a little bit later in the show, so I'm excited to talk about that at least a little bit there. I know that, people like Gestalt, but I kind of like NieR Replicant a little bit better, if I'm being
NieR
honest.
Replicant all the way. NieR Replicant all the way.
Yeah. Also has a really good remake as well, so definitely go check that out if you haven't played it already. And then NieRAutomata is a sequel to Replicant and takes place over thousands of years after the game's original ending. So it just takes place even farther in the future than the first one did. So again, you need to know even less about Drakengard, although there is like the little hint and reference here and there to the Drakengard series. And then NieRAutomata was originally released on PlayStation 4 and PC on March 7th, 2017, and it released a year later on Xbox on June 26th, and then it released last week on the Nintendo Switch. So funny enough, like you and I had actually come up with this topic like, I think it was like 2 or 3 months ago, before we even had the Switch release date, because they just announced the Switch release date for NieR around the same time that the latest Nintendo Direct happened. So like we didn't even know it was going to be super topical with the NieR Switch version. But
I think Yoko Taro listens to the RPG Cave and maybe just somehow figured out like, I feel like this is coming. Let's drop it in October so that it just all the stars align for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, Yoko Taro, the biggest RPG Cave super fan. Actually, how amazing would that be if Yoko Taro listened to this podcast? Like, that would be pretty incredible.
I would be quite shocked. Yeah, Yoko Taro, I love most of his games. Haven't played Drakengard 1.
Mm-hmm.
Drakengard 3 is in the backlog, but I played NieR Replicant, NieRAutomata, the Voice of Card games. So most of them, I just have to do Drakengard 3 at some point.
Yeah, whereas I haven't played the first 2 Drakengard games, but the only one I've played in the series is the third one on PlayStation 3. Because I remember like physical copies of those were like super cheap for a long time. So I ended up getting one for like $10 somewhere. So there you go. And then last fun fact, again, ties into one of my favorite games of this console generation. That's Final Fantasy XIV. There was a crossover event during Shadowbringers where they had a raid series based off NieRAutomata, but Yoko Taro and Yoshi P both confirmed that, with the crossover, that it's actually canon. So now NieRAutomata is canon in the Final Fantasy XIV universe, and the likewise is true for the Final Fantasy XIV universe is part of NieRAutomata's universe, if that makes any sense.
So basically, I have to play Final Fantasy XIV now.
You really do. I mean, not just because it's an amazing game, but there's this entire like raid series about like the some of the other side characters in NieRAutomata. But then you also fight some of the bosses from NieRAutomata, and oh my god, that raid series was so awesome. It was actually really good, especially if you liked the NieR games. Like it was just a
You're selling me on it.
I mean,
you're selling me on it.
We're gonna get you to play it at some point. It's fine. It's only 300 hours to beat, just the single player to get to where you need to get to the NieRAutomata raid, and then after that, it's about 40 hours of story itself in the raid, because Final Fantasy XIV has like cutscenes and stuff outside of the raid itself, and it has like this whole story that connects the two worlds together. So there's about 40 hours of story outside the raid itself. And then the raid itself is like a 25-man raid, and usually it takes about an hour or two just to do each of the 3 sections. So then you gotta, so it's about 50 hours of gameplay on top of the 300 hours it takes to get there. I'm sure you've got that much time at your disposal probably to get to that point at some point.
I should start as soon as possible.
Exactly. Well, anyways, that is it for the fun facts. Again, we'll talk about, some of the NieR games, because not only did we get, some of the questions about the other games, but we'll talk about it a little bit as we go. But first of all, I got to ask you, like, where did you get your start with this game? What did you play it like right away when it first came out on PS4 or PC? Did you wait till later? Like, where did you get started with the game?
I fell into it, I think, around 2018 during a Boxing Day sale when it was $20.
Yep.
The game title kept coming up on YouTube and Twitter. I was like, it's $20. What do I have to lose? And that's it. I had no expectations, no experience with any of the other games. jumped into it and was just blown away by it. Like I've never ever played a game like this where it takes you on such an emotional journey. But uh, Seth, $2 Hero, who's the new co-host of Nintendo Drive, he said it really well in one of his episodes where when you're playing in NieR Automata, you really don't know what to expect, not just in terms of how gameplay shifts, but even the story.
Mhm.
Like I'll never forget, and we'll talk about it later, but when I got to the third playthrough, I had to put the controller down because I could not believe what was coming and
Mhm.
what had just happened. And I was way off in terms of where I thought the story was going. So that part blew me away. But even getting to the fifth and final ending, just how philosophical the game was and just how meta it was, just has had such a strong emotional impact on me. And I think it was that game that made me realize like video games is my favorite medium. Like I do enjoy movies and television and other things, but I think video games just the NieR Automata made me realize that this is why video games are just so incredible. Didn't platinum it at that time just
Mhm.
because I just wanted to experience it as is. And then I believe I waited till I got my PS5
Mhm.
so that I could play it. I mean, there is no PS5 version of it, but at least I could get some
Yeah.
boosted mode. And then at that time, I got the platinum, and then now I'm going on another emotional journey with it on the Switch.
Nice, nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's weird that it just because I remember there were so many like the game was on sale very quickly because it just didn't. I don't think it sold super well out of the gate. I think it just took
No.
a little while for the word of
Yeah,
mouth to finally get out there for people to finally
yeah,
like convince people to pick it up. So it's interesting you see that because like for me, my story is very different from with this game where
right.
I was doing podcasts at the time, over at Game Moose with Drew McMillan, and I remember like seeing this game on my radar as games to be excited about. I also hadn't played the first NieR before playing this one, so
Okay,
you and I
yeah,
both had that in common. Whereas after I played this one, I was like, okay, now I need to go back and play, the
yeah,
other games in the series.
yeah.
But I remember seeing a demo pop up for this game because there was actually a demo that released for this game before it came out, where it was just the introductory level, like the
Oh,
introductory hour of the game was what the demo was. So I
mhm,
played. I was like all excited. I was like, oh, I'll try this demo out because it was at a time, even though 2017 was a huge year for games and one that was very busy throughout the year, it just happened to come out at the
yeah,
right time where there just wasn't a lot to play in like February of 2017.
mhm,
Besides, it'd be like it was before Horizon had come out, as an example, or Breath
mhm,
of the Wild to come out. So it was the perfect time for that demo to come out. So I tried the demo and was absolutely floored by how much I loved the demo because because you and I both know in the first like hour of that game you go through so many different styles of playing with that game, and I just love
yeah.
the way that game opened up, in that demo where I was like really sold on it. So I was very excited for it when it came out, and then it honestly kind of got lost in the shuffle for me when it came out
Oh,
because it came out in March when Breath of the Wild and Horizon both came out, and I think it was that way for a lot of people. Where I picked it
yeah,
up at launch, but it took me months and months to get to it. Like I did not get to it
mhm,
until like that summer where I had a little bit of a break from the haymakers of games we had because again the first like that March and April we had Horizon, we had NieR, we had Zelda, we had Persona 5. Like there was so many
mhm,
incredible games that came out just in that 2 month span that it was just hard even
mhm,
for a game like this one to really stand out and be like at the top of my list to play as. But again, when I played it over that summer, like I just really again got sucked into it, just really really enjoyed my time with it, and again going through the different endings and seeing just how the gameplay shifts with kind of each new playthrough, and how it all just felt like very different from each other and refreshing. Because again, a lot of people scoff at the idea, well, like when you tell them, oh well, you have to play through the game 5 times in order to finish the game correctly, and they're like, oh well, I don't want to play through the same experience 5 times. But that's not what you're doing in
right.
this game. You're doing something completely different every time. Like it's a very very different experience. So yeah, like that's how I got into it. Like I knew that that demo really sold me on it, and then I just had to have the game when it came out because I knew like I was gonna get to it eventually, even if I wasn't day one playing it. So there you go.
I do, I do feel like playthroughs might even be the wrong term for
Yeah,
it, just because, you like you said, Ryan, it's not like you're playing the same story 5 times over and over and over again. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest hurdles in terms of people giving the game a chance when they hear like, oh, if I'm going to get the true ending, I have to do all 5 playthroughs. It really should be viewed more like chapters in a book. And
yeah,
my perspective is playthroughs 1 through 3 is really the prologue, and the
yeah.
action actually picks up after playthrough 3. So I feel like that was a big hurdle for a lot of people. And I'm surprised that you liked the demo for the 1 hour, because a lot of people got turned off in the beginning. This isn't spoiler or anything, but the game is manual saves,
Right.
and the beginning of the game, it's pretty lengthy. It's around like 40, 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and then I think there's a first boss, and so if you die, it's back to the beginning. But it hooked you, eh?
Oh yeah, definitely. Now again, when I played the demo, I actually made it through without dying and didn't have a problem with it. But then when I
Wonderful.
got the full game, I actually died twice on the boss. And then I ended up going back to the beginning again and just like, oh my God, this sucks. Like, yeah, I definitely had this. So I got to experience it both ways. So, like, on the one hand,
Okay,
I got to experience, it was like, because this was back before every Square demo allowed you to transfer your save progress over to the main game. Like,
that's right. That's
this is
right.
one that I think really could have benefited from that, I think, a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. It was just something about, playing through that boss again like so many
Mhm.
months later. I guess I forgot how to play it. But what I loved about the demo was, again, it showcased
Okay.
the fact that you had, like, the side scrolling shooting sections, and then you had
Right.
the fast action sections. Like, I liked the way that it showed off the different gameplay styles, and that's what hooked me more than anything. Plus, I talked about this during the Valkyrie Elysium review, but I'll mention it here as well. Is just, I'm a huge fan of fast action games, stuff like Ninja Gaiden
Mhm.
or Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, like that. Those are some of my favorite 3D like styles of games. So having that style of combat in a game like this, while also having great RPG elements, and then again, mixing up the gameplay styles itself, like, it was a dream come true for someone like me to jump into a game like this too. So yeah, that's what hooked me
No,
more than
it
anything.
Platinum Games did a fantastic job with it. And I think when I compare Automata with Replicant and Gestalt, I think that's the biggest thing that holds those games back is the gameplay mechanics, especially the original ones in the PS3. They're not very good.
Yeah.
So bringing in Platinum Games was the right thing to do, to have a Yoko Taro story, beautiful soundtrack, and just like you said, fast-paced action from Platinum Games where it feels good
Yeah.
to actually do it and not feel tedious like in the other games.
For sure. And in Replicant, when they did the remake of it, even though it wasn't Platinum Games that did that remake, I can't remember who did it off the top of my head, but I know that another studio did that game.
Yeah.
But that game, like, also they very much took the gameplay style of Automata
Yep.
and then brought it to Replicant, which I think was the perfect move for that game too, because it also plays
You got it.
really well as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we need to talk about this next thing, which is, what makes this game so special? Why is NieRAutomata so special? Because I know for you in particular, again, you just talked about it. It's a very special game for you. It's the game that we a lot of people like to cite as, like, the game that really, reminded us that games will always be part of our lives because we love games. And I mean, for me, that game was Super Metroid, and it's still my favorite game of all time because of it. Where I can still go back and pick it up all these years later and know just like I knew from when putting the game down, after the credits rolled in Super Metroid, that would be a game that would always be in my life forever. And likewise, that's how I knew games were here to stay for me.
Mhm.
As a 10-year-old boy, I just knew that they would never, like, would be like the one constant in my life would be video games. So it's funny to hear you talk about NieRAutomata being that game for you, and I kind of want to know why. Like, why is this game so special to you? Anyways, I want to know go into more
Yeah.
deeper details on this.
I feel like it was the first game where I realized that the director not only understood what gamers are thinking and feeling, but Yoko Taro used that to pivot your expectations, to take you on a journey. So not only did he understand it, he used it for his storytelling. So um, again, the first 2 playthroughs, they do feel a bit repetitive in that sense, because those ones you are kind of going through the same story, but again, that's done very deliberately so that when you get to the third playthrough, you have an expectation of where the story's going, so that when he actually tells you this is the journey I'm taking you on. It has a larger impact on you.
Mhm.
Um, and just the way he uses the music as well. So each playthrough has the same songs, but they actually change for each playthrough. So there's actually a variation to it. And he uses that in a very manipulative way. I feel like because you hear the songs over and over again, you're in the same area, so it kind of feels very comforting and familiar until certain tragic events happen, and then those same songs they actually aren't very comforting anymore. They actually make you feel sad because this isn't the first playthrough anymore, and things have changed quite dramatically in that sense. So that's one of the biggest reasons why the game stood out to me was that he knew what he was doing. He's going to take you on this incredible journey that you had no idea what you're in for. But he also does this very clever way of incorporating philosophers into the game.
Mhm.
And he uses that to kind of do this very interesting way to kind of shine humanity's flaws, I thought, which is very interesting because it's kind of actually um, done through the robots,
Mhm.
not the Yorha androids, but the alien robots that you're seeing. So I think there's like 4 or 5 civilizations, and they've all kind of picked and chosen this type of civilization of humanity that they're trying to mimic. And you kind of see how it kind of fails, and it's kind of very interesting. So again, I'm very surprised that the demo hooked you so well because in the beginning, I honestly felt like this is just some typical um, Japanese action game,
Mhm.
and this story is going to be told to death about like, are robots like people? Do they feel anything?
Mhm.
Yoko Taro had no interest in talking about that story at all. He doesn't care if robots are like people. He has a much bigger story to tell, and he kind of just uses the robots to kind of show what kind of people can be like. I'm trying to think of the ones that pop up to mind. I think it's Jean Paul, and I can't remember. There's another female philosopher, so they kind of show how romance can be twisted and manipulated to kind of pervert how people love each other and how they have an affection for each other. I believe it's one of my favorite side characters in the story, which is Pascal. I think he was talking about how you can't live life without having fear.
Mhm.
So again, it's just so fascinating to see it because they're technically robots. They're programmed to do certain things, but they're choosing to learn about humanity's history, and they learned about this concept of fear. Oh, what does it mean to be afraid? Why is this useful? Why am I going to incorporate this into my programming and then use it in our robot village? I just found that
Mhm.
such a clever way to show different things about people, and that's not even the main story of the
No,
game.
no, it's definitely like a lot of the stuff that you just alluded to is all in like side stuff or just interactions with
Yeah.
NPCs and stuff like that. Because again, for the most part, if you really are just playing through the main campaign and just mainlining stuff and not interacting with a lot of the people environments, you're gonna miss out on a lot of this stuff. You're gonna be like, well, why is there this weird robot carnival out here in the middle of the world, and like,
Mhm.
why does this exist,
Mhm.
or why do the robots want to become as gods? Like, why is this even a thing? It's like, it's interesting that you brought it up because you're right. Like the first time I played through it, I didn't interact with a lot of the NPCs, and it wasn't really until the second playthrough that I started to explore that stuff a little bit more, versus my
Mhm.
first playthrough with 2B where I don't know, I just didn't, because I treated it like a lot of other games where you're not really expecting a ton of the story to come from either the environmental storytelling or the
Mhm.
story the storytelling from either side quests or just the side characters that you meet in the villages and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess the robots see humanity as this like higher being, I guess, and they just want to be like they're gods in the way that humanity aspires to be god in the same way. I think that's kind of the same mentality that's at work there, but obviously it fails because humanity's not perfect. So when the robots
Yep.
try to imitate us in an imperfect way, of course it's not going to work out well either, right? So yeah.
No, it was very fascinating to see all that stuff. And again, like we discussed, this is all the side stuff. If you just stick to the main line and to get to the story, in my opinion, this is the best story to teach the lesson of it's it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a simplification, but this game really um hits that message in ways you can't even imagine.
Yeah, it really reminds me of something like The Last of Us in the same way, because I feel like The Last of Us is kind of like that too, where even though the main narrative in the Last of Us is great, you miss so much of the narrative by not reading the notes and the collectibles in that game. Like
Yeah.
so I feel like kind of the same way about that game too, where even though you are getting like a good story in The Last of Us, just like you are, I think you're getting a good story in NieRAutomata as well, without doing all this extra stuff. I feel like the extra stuff just enhances the experience so much more and just makes it a more
It
worthwhile experience.
it really does. And I'm kind of curious to see how your experience was because we did it the same way where we played Near Automata first.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bunch of side stuff that's optional, but it actually references quite a lot of things from Near Replicant. So when
Yeah,
I played Near Replicant later, I started to see things like, wait a second, this was actually a callback in Automata, and this side character is actually in there. And it actually had like a huge emotional impact when I realized, wait a second, this character is actually from Replicant. So do you have to do all the side stuff in Automata? Do you have to play Replicant? The answer is no. But if you do, it enriches the experience like
yeah.
in such a vast way.
It's like when someone tells you, when you ask about the Legend of Heroes series, which is actually fresh on my mind because we just did the reveal of trails from Zero not too long ago. It's like, do you really need to play all the Legend of Heroes games? And the answer is, well, no. You probably get a good story with some of the games, but they all kind of tie together and they all have callbacks to other games. So you'll get a better experience out of it. You've played the other ones, and I feel like that's probably the same here, where it's like, I'm just going to come out and admit this, and you might feel sad about that I'm going to say this, but I'm just going to say it anyways. When I played NieR Replicant, I hadn't gone back and played NieR Automata since I finished it, since I did the playthrough again on Xbox. When it came to
Okay.
Xbox, I played it again in 2018, but then
Mhm.
I hadn't played it again until Replicant came out.
Okay.
So I totally forgot about everything when I played NieR Replicant. So I
Oh
just didn't
no.
have like the emotional callbacks and stuff like that because it just wasn't fresh on my mind or anything like that.
Gotcha.
For whatever reason. Which is just too bad because again, it sounds like I probably would have gotten even more of that the experience. Maybe if I played them back to back or closer together or something like that, or maybe if I had gone back and played through the older NieR games right away rather than waiting. Although Gestalt, to your point earlier, is just it's hard to get through that game. I'm just
No.
yeah,
No.
that original version. It's just it's not
No.
nearly as good as NieRAutomata. But to answer a question that you had earlier, because I feel like I should bring this up, and this also kind of tends to something else maybe we can segue into a little bit, is that I've talked about it on other podcasts before, but I'll mention this here. Like, gameplay is king for me when it comes to a lot of games. Like, I'm someone who is a sucker for a good story in games, but that's never like the motivating reason why I play a lot of games. I mostly play
Mhm.
games for the interactivity and the combat is really what I'm all about. So when you wondered why the demo brought me into it, because the demo, again, from story wise, felt like probably a generic action game. It was
Yep.
really the depth of combat that I found in the
Mm.
demo that really, really brought me into the experience and really carried me through even the early hours of this game. Because I mean, in NieR Automata's story, I will contend to say that the story itself just starts off very slow.
Yes,
There's a lot of
it
walking
really
around the
does.
desert and walking around the main
Hmm.
city. But
Hmm.
if it wasn't for the combat there, I think I might have had a harder time going through it and getting to like the good parts of the story. But
Hmm.
really the combat, because of the it's fast paced action, it's super precise as far as there's not really any latency with your movements and whatnot. Like, it's so satisfying to do like a perfect dodge and getting slow down
Yes,
time.
it's so good.
And I love the mix between ranged attacks and melee attacks and the different weapons just feeling so different from each other. Like, that was what really sold me on it before the story actually sold me on it. So it actually took longer for me to get invested in the game's story than I think it
Mhm.
did for you. But I think the combat, again, really sold me on it before the story really could in a way.
Did you find the gameplay switching jarring? Because I know some people have said that it's kind of abrupt when it goes from side scroller, bullet hell, 3D action game to 8-bit
Yeah.
sections. Did you? Because for me, on my very first playthrough, I didn't find it jarring at all until somebody mentioned it, and I was like, "Oh, you're actually right. This is this is switching up quite a bit,
Yeah.
and quite frequently. But I didn't notice the first time I played.
Yeah, in the first level, I didn't really expect it to happen because I didn't really know
Yeah.
much about the series at the time. So
Mhm.
it was a little bit jarring the first time it happened, but then after that, it was like, oh, I'm like, I love this idea. I'm gung ho about this. Let's just, give me all the different genres in this game. I will play. Like I was expecting there to be like a visual novel section later in the game where I'm doing a whole bunch of like weird like dating sim stuff, but no, that did not happen.
There's a text-based part near the end. There's a text-based adventure near the end.
Yeah,
It's more forgiving than replicants.
exactly. But it's not but what I'm like describing. But yeah, I expected like all kinds of weird genre stuff to happen here, and so yeah, no, I didn't really find it jarring at all. Again, I felt like
Mm.
if anything, I found that that's what separated it from other more generic Japanese action games was the fact that it was bold enough to try and do different things with the gameplay and the combat and try and experiment a little bit with that instead of just being a standard hack and slash game. Like that's one of the
The
reasons
whole
why I'm
time.
actually really excited for Bayonetta 3, which is coming out in a few weeks, because it
Mhm.
looks like they're not necessarily doing the exact same thing with that, but it does really feel
Oh.
like from what we've seen from the trailers, like there's a lot of varying differences with the gameplay, and it doesn't look like it's just going to be your standard, hack and slash game like some of
Mhm.
even the first Bayonetta was at least a little bit. So I like that a lot more of these games are starting to explore the space a little bit. After NieR Automata kind of inspired a lot of people to try different things with this. But it's also something I wish that more developers would do, like try mixing up genres. Because the only other popular game I can really think of that does that was Battletoads that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Like the new Battletoads game because it was a like it was you were racing down the turbo tunnel, but also it was a beat 'em up game. It also was like a Donkey Kong Country platforming game, and it was all kinds of weird stuff
Mhm.
kind of rolled into one. I wish more developers would do that kind of thing and experiment. But what do you think?
That's that's one of my again. There's so when you ask what's your favorite thing about your Automata, there's an endless list. And as you mentioned this, one of my favorite things about this game is that I feel like Yoko Taro wasn't afraid to try something new,
Mhm.
even though when you list it on the surface, like multiple playthroughs, gamers are going to hate that. Switching gameplay mechanics jarringly, players are going to hate that. This looks like a generic sci-fi story. Players are going to hate that. On the surface, it sounds like you really shouldn't try this stuff, but clearly Yoko Taro, he had a vision for this is how the experience is going to unfold. Let's just try it. If it doesn't work out, I mean, it is what it is, but I feel like if video games is an art and if people aren't trying new things, we're just going to get stagnated and just going through the same experiences over and over again.
Mhm.
And especially when you think about just how many video games there are today, some of them just start to feel the same. So NieR Automata was really like a breath of fresh air with all those things, trying new things. It's a big ask because of all the things that I just listed, but if you
Mhm.
stick through it, you'll realize like this is an experience like no other.
Yeah.
And Yoko Taro was pushing the medium forward, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and people are starting to learn from that.
And it's definitely something he even did in both his older games with the Drakengard games were known for that, which is why like they were so divisive when they came out. Like he was trying all
Hmm.
kinds of experimental stuff with those games, and either you were really into the Drakengard games or you hated them. Like they people really felt like they found the two camps because I think just people in the PS2 and PS3 era were just not ready for that type of game. I think maybe in the late
Hmm.
PS3 era with Drakengard 3, but that just didn't really sell enough copies to get enough people to really play it
No.
anyways because people were just burned from the first two Drakengard games. But also even with something like House of or Voice of Cards is interesting as well because again a lot of people saw
Yes.
that first trailer and they're like, oh, that's just some standard card game that has this fantasy tale
No,
when it's definitely not that at
no,
all when you play it. So
it's not.
it's like
You got it.
very different as well and trying to push that JRPG medium forward even though I know those games aren't very popular either. Like people are just not flocking to them in the same way that people flock to anything NieR at this point, which is too bad.
No, it makes me very sad because the both voice of card games, I haven't finished the third one yet, but the first two, it's a Yoko Taro story. Not to the same extent and scale as NieR Automata, but you're
Yeah.
still gonna get lots of twists and turns and emotional experience. Same composer. And who doesn't like card games? Like They're exciting. They're fun.
You'd be surprised how many people do not like card games. But at the same time, again, it's not a standard card game. It's just, all your actions are represented by cards, but you're not actually, playing cards, if that makes
Correct.
sense.
Correct.
Whereas again, I know like someone like, Donnie Reese out there who listens to this show, or I guess doesn't, because I know he doesn't like RPGs. He's the type of person that is like, if there's cards in it, I'm not playing it. So, and I know a lot of people that are like that out there. Like even Midnight Suns, Marvel's Midnight Suns, which is coming out in December, which I'm actually really looking forward to. Like it looks like an awesome strategy game, but because it has cards in it, I think it's a big turnoff for people. So,
No, that makes me so sad. I really enjoy the card games, and for the backtrackers, we're actually playing Inscription. And
yeah.
let me tell you, like the first 40 minutes, like I've never sweated like that because it was so intense. Because it's a roguelite as well.
Mhm.
It was really intense. So I don't know. I feel like the cards, when done effectively and proficiently, it adds such a layer of strategy to it, kind of like real-time strategy games. But
Right.
I don't, try the card games, people. They're good.
You're making Garrett Bland proud right now, because you're singing the song of the card games, and I know if Garrett was here, he'd probably be chiming in about how he loves card games as well. So, just had to throw that out there as a huge shout out. So, now that we've talked about what we love about NieR Automata, what makes it special, and why it has a special place in our hearts, we should talk real quick because I know that this can be confusing for people who haven't played the game before, because we actually, again, I think someone might have wrote in about this, but we'll skip over that for now. So I want to talk about the differences between the various releases and then which one we recommend playing, because I know, again, you've played every release pretty much of this game at this point. Most of them. Well, I think between the two of us, I think we played everyone, because I haven't played the Switch version, but I've played both PC versions and the Xbox and the PlayStation 4 version. So yeah, and then you've played the Switch version, so I think we've got them all covered at this point. And
we got it covered.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the base game on PlayStation 4 and PC, which is just the base game. There was a DLC pack that came later where you actually fight Yoko Taro as a boss at the end of the game, but you have to have a save cleared file in order to play that DLC. So you basically have to beat the game, and then you can fight him as like the true final boss. And it's like a really fun little DLC pack. Again, it's nothing huge or anything like that. Like it's $5, so it's a very small piece of DLC if you have the original game. But any of the versions that came out after the PlayStation 4 and original PC release did just include the DLC. So the Xbox version, is the Become as Gods edition. And it's basically just the same as the PlayStation 4 version with, the DLC added. They did some slight tweaks to the gameplay though, to kind of smooth out the frame rate on Xbox, especially on One X in particular, because that game got some really nice One X enhancements. And it actually runs like buttery smooth on Xbox One X and then Series X, respectively as well, which is kind of cool. And then they actually took that same version and then moved it to PC again when the game came to Game Pass on PC. But then if you own the game on Steam, you had the original version and they didn't upgrade you because they never moved that version to Steam. It only exists on the Xbox like Windows Store, essentially. So you have to buy like that version there, which again not only includes the DLC, but it actually includes a bunch of fixes, because at launch on PC this game was a total mess as far as the game's performance and the way like the game would crash a ton for people. Like it was not a very good experience for people, and it was very poorly optimized, and even that original version on Steam is still not really well optimized. But I know that version that is on like the Xbox Game Pass app on PC is coming to Steam at some point soon, later this year. So people will have a chance to play that version finally if you have it on Steam already. But yeah, it's just a weird situation too, where like we don't really get that often, where a game that comes to PC Game Pass that's been on PC already that gets like a new version of it with updates. Like that usually never happens. So this was kind of a one-off case, which was weird. And then of course we got the Switch version, which came out this week, which was the end of the Yorha edition, which again kind of includes everything else, but I think it runs at 30 frames per second, right?
It is 30 frames per second. I played maybe about 3 hours. It's quite stable. I'll admit, first starting it was jarring, going from 60 to 30. But once you get used to it, it's quite stable. Apparently docked version, it actually does run at 1080.
Okay.
So it's quite crisp. When people say like, is this the miracle port on Nintendo Switch? It really is. I hate to say this, but it's Square Enix It's Nintendo Switch. I was expecting it to be a hot mess and it would just chug, especially with the fast-paced action parts when there's lots of enemies, there's lots of things coming at you, projectiles and explosions.
Yeah.
Didn't stu hasn't stuttered once. None of that has happened. So I don't feel like there's too many um, things that they took away for it to run on Switch.
Right.
Especially in dock mode, it's pretty good. But even playing in handheld, it's been quite a treat. I mean, I'm playing one of my favorite games of all time, and it's running quite like decently in handheld mode. So I'm enjoying it quite a bit. But otherwise, like you said, Ryan, there's nothing else much to it besides some new costumes if you want to try it. But
Yeah.
it's just nice to play in handheld. That's about it.
Yeah. What's interesting about that too, that you describe it as a miracle port, and actually it's just hilarious to me to think about, is that they couldn't get Kingdom Hearts 1 to run on Switch natively because it's a cloud version, but they got NieRAutomata to run flawlessly on
Right?
Switch. Like, what kind of world are we living in when stuff like that happens? This is real dumb. I don't understand.
No, I'm shocked in a good way. It worked out for me because I was expecting it to crash and burn,
Oh
to be
man,
honest.
imagine if this was a cloud version. Imagine if they did NieRAutomata cloud version, like what that would be like to play. Like I can't even imagine that. Like playing that
I'd be so
game
upset.
with like the latency drops and stuff like that. Oh my god.
I'd be so upset.
Oh, that's so silly. Well, we've gotten to the part of the show now where I think, we've talked about the game's mechanics. We talked about, the game itself. Again, like we usually don't like to do story spoilers when it comes to this type of thing, especially now that like with the Switch release last week. I know a lot of people are actually jumping into this for the first time now it's on Switch, so we don't want to spoil the story or anything. So I think it's time to move to final thoughts about the game itself before we get into listener questions. So I'm gonna turn to you as the guest to go first on this one. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet about NieRAutomata that you wanted to talk about with the game? Of course, no story spoilers or anything like that, or anything else we left kind of unsaid about the game?
I think that's what makes it so hard to persuade people to give the game a chance because the less that we say, the better.
Mm-hmm.
But in my head, I'm like, if you only knew what happens at this playthrough, and then at this one, and then at this one, and at the final ending. So that makes it very hard. And again, with all the things that the game asks you to do, it does ask gamers, it asks a lot from gamers to give it a chance. But
Yeah.
final thoughts are, I hope that you do give it a chance, because it is an experience like no other. And I honestly feel like it's not just here's multiple playthroughs, you see it from different perspectives. It's no, here's multiple playthroughs, and then so I can subvert your expectations and take you on a different journey so you don't know what's coming for you.
Mm-hmm.
When people say, NieR Automata has the best soundtrack, they're not messing around, and I'm one of them. Like it's one of the best soundtracks you'll ever hear, and like I said, it changes through each playthrough, but it's such an eclectic compilation. Like some songs are very traditional, some are quite more unique. Like the carnival music is one of the songs that stand out quite a bit.
Yeah.
So just everything put together makes it such a special game. Um, don't quote me on it, but there's this thing that Yoko Taro, uh, he had a very interesting analogy when people were asked of like, what do you want people to experience from NieR Automata, or what do you want people to look at it, or like how to see it? The way he described it was, he wants people to look at NieR Automata the way you would look at your first love interest when you
Mm-hmm.
were high school or in elementary school or whatever. Um, when you look back at your first love interest now, you could probably easily, without even making an effort, identify all these flaws with that person, look wise, personality wise, easily. But even though you identify all these flaws, this person hopefully holds a special place in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And Yoko Taro says he already knows NieR Automata is not the perfect game. You can find flaws in the textures, in the landscapes, the some of the combat aspects, but he hopes that the story has a special place in your heart. And I thought that was such a sweet analogy to describe his game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's one of those games like that that you could definitely tell it was special because it really stood out in a year that's probably one of the best years of video games that we'll ever have, at least for the next
100%.
5 or 10 years at this point. Like, and it's starting to look like maybe 2023 might rival 2017, but it's just like with so many special games that came out that year, and it to be leaves such an impact in that same landscape. Like it just says everything. It kind of totally sums up the point you just brought up, and it's why it's resonated with so many people over the years, I think, and likewise why it did for me as well. Like again, it had like such a profound, feeling on me as well. Just looking back on it, like I look on that game, look back on it very fondly, and again, I just forget some of the little nitpicks I had about the game when it first came out and when I first played it, and just look back on it on all the good memories I had with it, and just it's always a good, fun game even to go back to as well, and just play through and just mess around with and just have fun with, because I do think it's just a fun game to play and enjoy, and just the whole gameplay experience, not just the story, but the story and the combat together. I find just creates like this perfect mixture of just fun. It's fun to go play it through. Even through kind of the sadder and more emotional moments, I still just had fun, throughout my entire playthrough of the game, and just had a great time playing it. So yeah, I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and talk about this game. But now I think it's time to bring in some of the listeners, because we asked some people what they thought about NieRAutomata, and if they had some questions about us with the full final game. And Bland Explosion, aka Garrett Bland, coming to us from Europe, even though I think Garrett's actually back from Europe now, but we just wanted to give him the night off because of time zones and stuff. He says, "Hi, first time writing in. How many times do you have to beat NieRAutomata to get the quote unquote full experience?" So kind of like what you were saying, I actually, I'm reminded by, the Leon statue I see behind you. In a lot of ways, like the playthroughs in this game kind of remind me of what you experienced with something like Resident Evil, where, playing through the game as a different character, it like changes the way that you look at that game and the way you interact with that game in such a meaningful way. So again, I wouldn't really consider it, full playthroughs of the game, in quotations. Again, audio listeners, I'm doing quotations with my hands. So again, the answer is 5. Like you got to get to the fifth ending, and then that's kind of where it ends. But yeah, what do you think about this question? Yeah. Do you really you need to go that far? Do you need to get to ending number 5 to get the full story?
Yes, 100%. You do have to get to the fifth ending for sure. But again, I don't want to say like it's 5 playthroughs. Like
exactly. I'm setting the expectation that way, but I know it actually isn't, because I want to fool people a little bit. But you're spoiling you're throwing letting the behind the curtain. I don't like this. I don't like this. You don't like this.
Less is more. It's not that long, guys. Trust me, it's not that long.
Yeah, honestly, like this game is not very long at all when compared to a lot of other games we talk about on this show. We're not talking about a 100-hour RPG here or anything like that.
No.
But, yeah. But next question comes to us from the Muffin Mon, aka Evan Ainsworth, who says, "Hi, Ryan and my Team Luigi co-captain. As someone who tried to get into NieRAutomata but couldn't, I was wondering if you have any tips for any new players to get the most out of the experience." So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but really just, play through it and don't give up after the first couple of hours if you are not really, vibing with the story is what I would say. Because again, like the story, I think starts off really slow, which I think is just a turnoff for some people, and maybe Kevin kind of falls into this camp as well. Because again, without us spoiling it, it gets way, 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 way better. Like there's definitely one scene. Well, I'm just gonna say it. I'm not gonna spoil the context or anything like that. I'm just gonna say when I got to the carnival, I knew it was on. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. I knew when I got there, I knew I was in 100%, and I was not going to stop until I saw the end of the game. But what do you say to this question? Because I'm curious to know what you think about this.
I would say just bump the game down to easy. Because that first part, it can be challenging even on normal to get past up to the first boss and actually successfully get past the boss to actually be able to save. So don't hesitate to bump it to easy. You can actually start equipping certain auto chip-ins. So plug-in chips are kind of like, how would you describe them? Like buffs, like they're passive traits.
Yeah, they're just like passive skills is what I would say.
Yeah, so in easy mode, you can even do auto evade, so you'll never get hit. You can even do auto attack, so then you can just let the game do the beating for you. So you can tailor it to however you want. And then I would avoid the side stories because if the story, again, like Ryan said, it takes a while for the main story to actually pick things up. So you don't have to do the side stories and just mainline it to get through to the main story on easy mode. And if you're still not feeling it by near the end of the second playthrough, then NieR Automata is just not connecting with you, unfortunately. And it is
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah, not everyone's gonna like the game.
Yeah, for sure. And when we say, play a while to get into it, like we're not talking, Final Fantasy 13 length where you got to play 20 hours until the game gets good. Like we're talking
No.
like put 2 or 3 hours in and you'll get to kind of where we're talking about. So again, it's not like a huge time investment to kind of, get to where I think the game gets really good. So yeah, I'd say that's you got to kind of just have to power through it. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. But again, there's lots of people out there that are not into this game. Now, hold on, this kind of made me think of something before I get to this next question. What do you have to say? What do you think about the people who I've talked to before who have played through the game once, got to the first set of credits, and they're like, "All right, I'm done. I beat the game," and then never went back to it. What do you think about? Because those people are out there. There's quite a few people that are those people.
That it really hurts, but I honestly don't blame them though, because in other video games, when they're like, trying New Game Plus and try to start again, I'm like, you know what? No, thank you. I've had my credits. It's there's no easy answer because if the game tells you too much, like this is why you should continue,
Mm-hmm.
it takes away from the experience.
Yeah.
Whereas it does it in such a subtle way of like, hey, if you start up the game, you might get a different perspective. It's worth it, but again, it doesn't push you enough to do it. So it hurts when people say that they finish the game by getting to the end of playthrough A because honestly, just like you're scratching the surface
Yeah.
if anything at all.
Yeah, you really haven't even played like the bulk of the experience at all.
No.
You've basically left Midgar in Final Fantasy VII. Like at that point.
Yes. Thank you. That's perfect analogy. Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Like I think like even if I didn't know from word of mouth that was what you were supposed to do, I might have fallen into that trap and not known. Because again, to your point, the game I don't think does a good enough job of telling the player or communicating to the player that, hey, by the way, like there's more here. Please keep playing the game, kind of thing. Like especially because there's credits and stuff. Like
again, I don't think there's an easy way to do it because if you encourage it too much, then it kind of sets your expectations very high. Like, oh, there must be something humongous coming for me when I get there, and you might be expecting something too over the top where you might not be able to get those things.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing it in a more subtle way, again, it kind of manages your expectations. You get through the second playthrough, which is the first storyline, but just from a different perspective. There's no easy way. It's just the game asks a lot, but from my experience, it asks a lot, but it gave a lot.
Well, likewise, I knew better when it came around time to play a game the next year, which was Doki Doki Literature Club, which is a visual novel, one of my favorite visual novels of all time, where when you just like in NieR Automata, when you see the first set of credits, that's not the end of the game. There's way more of a game there that you're supposed to go back to, but it's just like NieR Automata. It also doesn't tell you, hey, by the way, you're supposed to press continue at the start, like when it kicks you back to the title screen after the credits to then continue playing with like the rest of the story kind of thing. So yeah, I know that there is certainly games out there that are like that for people, and again, since I knew from NieR Automata, because they do something similar in that game too, where they kind of give you a message when you finish the first playthrough of that game to keep going with it, but they don't tell you to keep doing it. Like I knew from playing NieR Automata, I was like, oh, I see what you're doing here. So I'm gonna keep playing this, and turns out I love that game, and I'm so glad that I decided to keep playing it. But, anyways, next question comes to us from Haley over on the Discord, and she says, "Ayo, do we wish to see 2B and other Yorha androids appear in a new game down the line?" So again, I'm assuming Haley's referring to like a new NieR game, whether it's, a sequel or a spin-off game or something else. Because again, they've already reappeared in another game, that game being Final Fantasy XIV, I'll have you know. Because, 2B and 9S, they're both in that. They're both in Final Fantasy XIV. So you can go see them there. But would you like to see maybe them do a spin-off of Automata or do something more with these characters? Or because I don't know about you, but because of the way that the finality of their stories in Automata, I I don't know if I want to see anything else with them. But what do you think?
No, I agree, and that's it's not Yoko Taro's style. Even
Mhm.
though, you know, Nier is a spin-off from Dragon Guard, and then NieRAutomata is a spin-off from Nier Replicant. The stories and characters could not be more different. I could not possibly see him. I mean, if he does do another Nier game, I don't think we're seeing 2B, 9S, or the Yorha androids. I don't think. I think he'll do a spin-off and kind of go in a completely different direction that I have no idea where he's going.
Yeah.
But like you said, just the way the story ends in Automata, we really don't need to see more of 2B or 9S.
Yeah.
It would kind of take away from the point
I
of
really
what
felt like, yeah,
happens
at
at
the
the
end of that,
end.
I'm like, I don't need to probably see these characters again. And just to
No.
put the Final Fantasy 14 segment in context, the events that happen in the raid series for Final Fantasy 14 with Nier exist
Okay.
in the timeline, like as the events are happening in Automata. So it makes
Okay.
sense as to why those characters would be there.
Hmm.
And it's just naturally woven into the Nier Automata narrative, which is one of the reasons why I really like that raid series as well, as someone who played Automata. So, but yeah, you're
Hmm.
right. Like, I don't think we need like a side game or anything like that. I just, if anything, I hope that he does another Nier game at some point and they do something completely different with it with new characters.
Just something so far left field. That's what I want. Just I have no idea what's happening.
It's gonna be a collectible card game. You heard it here, folks. You're gonna have to open up some booster packs. Well, actually, that's not too much different from the Nier mobile game, I guess, because it's got gacha mechanics. So that's kind of halfway there
Yeah.
already. But and if you want your 2B fix, go play that. So there you go. Next up, we got Awesome Dave 1337, who said, I just wanted to pop in and say that Nier Automata is a true masterpiece, and I bet 2B has her consoles vertically. Because, I mean,
No.
hashtag Team Vertical. That's what we are in this household. Right? 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 You agree with me, right?
No, we're team horizontal. No, she would be she would be team horizontal. Awesome, Dave. Sorry.
Oh, God. Yeah. And then last question of the week comes to us from Skycatcher Gaming, who asks, do you think the original Nier, so Nier Gestalt for North America, will ever come to PlayStation? I want to buy a Series X just to play it in its 4K glory, because it is backwards compatible, I believe. Papa Nier or Brother Nier, which is your favorite? So first off, before we answer Papa Nier or Brother Nier, first off, do you think they'll ever bring Gestalt back? Whether it's a remake or a remaster or just porting the game?
I honestly don't think so because of the Near Replicant remake that came out.
Yeah.
I think it was last year in 2021. That's honestly the definitive version of that story. And like you said, Ryan, they had another developer come in and just really tweak the combat quite dramatically so that it's more enjoyable. Not quite as good as Automata, but very close to it.
Mhm.
Not just updated graphics, but Near Replicant, the remake, not only does it have a new side story, it has a brand new ending.
Yeah.
So there's almost no point in going back to playing Gestalt except for funsies. But otherwise, the definitive version is Replicant because the ending that they added in that remake changes things quite dramatically. So I can't see them ever porting, remaking or remastering Gestalt, porting, but
Yeah.
again, why port that one when you can play Replicant?
Mhm.
Um, in terms of Gestalt, like Papa Nier or Brother Nier, I'm gonna go with Brother Nier just because, from my understanding of the games, Nier still has a romantic relationship with Kaine.
Mhm.
So Papa Nier is much older
Yeah.
in Gestalt. So that would just kind of really weird me out if he still has a romantic relationship with Kaine.
Yeah.
Whereas Replicant, yeah, I know what they were going for because it was, Papa Nier is going out of his way to help his daughter. There's that paternal relationship, and I guess he's more manly the way they designed him. But
I guess.
the replicant works much better with the younger age with Brother Nier, the relationship he has with Kaine, and the brother and sister dynamic still works out quite well. I feel like we're kind of leading into an episode about Nier Replicant, Ryan.
At some point, we might maybe you'll have to come back and do that. But yeah, I think you're right on the nose with them ever bringing this back. Like I don't think like it didn't really sell well the first time, and I know people are really into the Nier series now, but I don't know
Mhm.
if like a straight port of Gestalt would sell well. or sell well enough for Square Enix to really take a chance on bringing it back. Especially because they're already taking risks on a lot of older franchises to kind of see, you know, what'll stick and what's worth bringing back and what's not coming back. So I just don't think that they'll ever bring that back, unfortunately. And even for the reasons you talked about, there's no real reason to even go back and play that game unless you really feel like you need to go back and play it just for the heck of it, just because you feel like you need to, right? Like that's the only reason it exists. Like if you want to be the completionist and play every game in the series, then technically you have to. But at that point, you're right. Like there's no other reason, especially because again, it just plays so much worse than NieR Replicant 2. It's just like, it's just so much harder to go back to. And yeah, I think I agree with you on Brother NieR. It just felt, you know, so much more natural of a story versus, you know, Gestalt's story, which is just, I don't know. It's the same story. It's basically the same character, like a different character put into the same scenario as a different character. And it's weird, but it felt weird to play as him the first time. But
no, it's weird. And you know, play Replicant the remake. There's a little Easter egg for Papa NieR, so you still get your fix.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like it's not like he never comes up again in the story or anything like that. So yeah, it works into it a little bit. But yeah, you're right. Like I would say go do that. So yeah, your Skycatcher Gaming, if you want to play it, if you actually like are dead set on playing it, if you've already played, you know, Replicant and you want to try it, then Series X is probably your best place to go, or Series S, or even, you know, 1X if you don't have a Series X, is a good option as well. Because again, I think it also got 1X enhancements as well, because I think it plays in 4K on 1X, so I think that's a good option too if you have one of those. But anyways, I think that's gonna kind of, you know, put a bow on our very fancy conversation about NieR. But dude, this was awesome. Thank you so much for hopping in on the call with me and hopping on the show with me and filling in for Gareth this week. I really appreciate it. So if people want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
It's just ngachacha in the Carpool Gaming Discord and on Twitter. But like Ryan said, you just can see a lot of NieRAutomata stuff on my Twitter, especially
you see that
now.
As if someone's not listening to this episode that doesn't want to see that, because they obviously might have clicked on this video because they're excited about NieRAutomata. So maybe they want to know more about another place to find endless tweets about the game. So you never know. You might surprise some people. But
fair enough. But thank you, Ryan, for this opportunity. I've had a blast.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, as for me, you find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. I've just been tweeting about the Halloween movies recently, and not NieRAutomata, because I'm rewatching them all again because, you know, Halloween Ends comes out this weekend. I'm very excited about that. You also find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, where again, I've got my reviews up for Valkyrie Elysium and the Geofold Chronicle, so definitely make sure to check those out if you're interested in those RPGs. And also you can find us on podcast services around the globe. So for ngachacha, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been level 67 of the RPG Cave, and we're out. Bye-bye.
Bye.